Hey guys, I've been playing board games for a few years now, and through my journey I've learned how to paint board game miniatures and board game tokens and stuff like that. And whenever they come out onto the table, they always have such a nice table presence. It's always a little extra oomph for the gaming experience, which I really enjoy. And I often get asked, how do you do this? Or like, this must take so much time and stuff like that. And yes, it does take a bit of time, but it's not impossible for you to accomplish. If you're feeling unsure about it and want to learn some tips, well, this is the place to be, because I'm going to be showing you some of my miniatures. At the same time, I'm going to be showing you some tips on how to do some of these painting techniques. I'm not necessarily the best painter out there, but I have learned a thing or two, which I think will be helpful, particularly for beginner painters. All right, let's jump into them. All right, so I thought I'd start with something very, very simple. These are some of the tokens from Lost Ruins of Arnak. Now, when these came in the box, they were very, very basic. They were just one color, and with a very simple yet effective technique, I was able to bring these to life. You can see all those carvings in there and how they've got a bit of a darker sort of tone there and pop out a lot more. This is very much easy to do. So if you've never painted anything before, this is a great way to start. So to do this, first you have to prime it. So you need to get a primer and spray the entire thing. Once you do that, you can start painting it. So you just paint over with the color that you want. For this one, I use like a whitish beige kind of color. That is the main color there. And how I got this effect with all these dark sort of etchings in there, all you have to do is take some of this stuff. Now this is known to a lot of people in the painting community as skill in a bottle, and they're not wrong. This thing can bring so many things to life with very, very little effort at all. So this is what they call a wash, and very simple. You take a brush and you brush over the model or the tokens, whatever you're painting. And this is a very liquidy type of paint. I'll show you if you have a look. It's very, very runny, all right? It's very, very watery. And what will happen is all that water will seep deep into those crevices there. So it just drops right in there and you just leave it there. You let it sit there and it will dry up and it will create that dark color in there. And that's all it takes to create such a really cool effect. So if you're just starting out, this is a really good one to try out. So you want to grab the Citadel color shades. That's what they're called, but everyone calls them a wash. So if you ever see discussions online about washes and stuff like that, this is what they're talking about. Another thing I thought I should mention when you're using a wash is that because you're using it all over the miniature, this color can be quite strong, and you might find that it stains the color of your miniature like a coffee sort of brown, and you don't necessarily always want that effect. But if you want to reduce that, you can actually use this. This is Lahime Media. I think I'm saying that right. I have no idea. But what you do here is you actually mix it in with the wash, and this helps reduce that sort of strength of that wash. So you'll still get the benefit of seeing all those recesses colored in, but it won't affect the overall paint job as much. There'll just be a very small brown, you know, whereas if you don't use this, and you're using like a miniature that's quite bright and vibrant, it might look like you've just dunked it in coffee if you're just using this on its own. So what you want to do is you want to mix these half and half. So have something out like a plastic palette or something like that. You can use anything. You can even use a dinner plate, right? And you can just put that on your plate, mix them together before you apply it to your miniature. Okay, next I'm going to show off some of these miniatures from Marvel Zombies. There are some great miniatures in here. Let's take a look. So as you can see, I've been working my way through all these zombies that come in the X-Men Resistance box. There is a lot of multiple men there, and I think these are a really good one to show off since I just talked about that wash. If you take a look, I used the exact same wash on these zombies, and look at that effect it creates on them. You see how it's gone into all those caresses and made them look really dirty and grungy and gross? Yeah, skill in a bottle. That's what they call it, right? Anyone can pull this off. And it's just a matter of everything else I've done, I've just colored in all the parts there. It's time consuming, but anyone can do this. Look how great that is. That's awesome. I'll show a few more. So this one here, this one's been pulled apart. Look at him. Wounds everywhere. And why not we show one more? Look at those. They're looking great. I also want to show off these guys. These are the Reavers, and these ones I managed to do much quicker than the multiple men. The secret here was that I used an airbrush. So with an airbrush, I went over the entire model in a dark brownish red. And I know not everyone has an airbrush, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but worth talking about. If you are looking at getting an airbrush, they can make your life a lot easier. So I went over it all in this orangey sort of reddish kind of color. And I don't know if you can see, if you look into the crevices, you can kind of still see that orangey red. And what I've done is I've actually sprayed over it faintly with layers of green to create the layered effect. So you can still see like shades of different coloring, and that's what makes it sort of pop out a little bit more. And then after that, I've just gone on and just colored all this gray. So very quick. It didn't take me very long at all to do these ones. And when you've got a busy life, that's what you want to do. You want to get the most effect for your time, right? So yeah, very proud of how these guys turned out. I'll show you one more. This one, you can definitely see more of that orange underneath. All right, it kind of looks like he's just mauled someone and there's blood dripping from his fingers, which is really cool. And you can see how much it makes those sort of warts pop up when you use that layered effect. They really stand out and make them look really gross and pussy. Okay, before we move off all the Marvel stuff, I've also painted a few of the heroes and zombie heroes from the Marvel's Heroes of Resistance I want to show off. So there is the zombie Scarlet Witch. And in a moment, I'm going to explain to you a little tip of how I got those eyes to be yellow, and they've kept right in there, right? Here is the Black Panther. Very happy with how that one turned out. And over here, we've got the Hulk. Now, with him, just like with Scarlet Witch, I had to paint in the eyes, right? Now, eyes can be very tricky, but they don't have to be too difficult. So remember how I said that washes drop into the recesses? These eyes are in a recessed part of the model. So you can do the same kind of thing. So what you want to do is you want to water down your paints, right? And you do this by mixing in just a little bit of paint with the painter on your paintbrush, right? And it makes it more watery. So in the same way as a wash, you can actually just drop in the paint right into the eye, and you don't have to be, you know, perfect with it. You just wash away. If it like spills over, you just wash. Because it's so wet and watery, you can just wipe it away with a brush and it won't leave a mark on your model. If the paint dries, that's when you've got a problem, right? I also did this with the mouth as well. So I started in the mouth with sort of a pinkish sort of color, put that in there, you'll see it's not really pink anymore, right? So I've actually gone in there with a wash after that, and it's just given it like that darkness, like, you know, you can't really see inside a person's mouth, and just gives it that sort of darkness, makes it more realistic. And the teeth, which were white, and I don't know if you can see there, they're kind of yellowy, which makes them a bit more real. That's what the wash did as well. It just made them stain just a little bit to make them look a bit more realistic. And I don't know if you noticed the shade on the Hulk's muscles. It makes those muscles just pop out that little bit more. You can really see that effect when I put him upside down like that, right? You can see that underneath he's a lot darker, and that was done with an airbrush, but you don't actually need an airbrush to do this. There's a technique called slap chop, and what you do is you do something that's called a zenithal highlight, and I'll explain how you do that, right? So you prime your model like always so the paint can stick to the model, yeah? But then after that, you put black all over it. So you just get a rattle can and you spray black all over the model. And I would recommend definitely using spray cans that are for miniatures. I did try using like Bunnings, you know, warehouse paints, but they do not gel well with the acrylic paints that we use for miniatures. So yeah, stay away from those. Spend a little bit more to keep your model safe, right? So you spray it all black, and then from the top, you want to spray just a little bit of white. And what that is going to do, it's going to create like a highlight, like the sun is shining down on the model. And it's going to create a different tone. So the top of the model is going to be lighter, and all these sort of bits that are hidden away, like in between the muscles, you know, underneath the model, they're going to be darker. So you go over this with your green paint and you're going to see a difference in the shade, right? And that's something very easy that you can do just to create that difference. And if you have trouble doing that, you could also use contrast paints. So contrast paints, in the same way that a wash works, is they're a bit more watery. So they're going to be easier to put on there, and they're going to, you know, because they're thinner, the parts where they're lighter, that light is going to show up a bit more. It's going to create that contrast to make the skin really stand out a bit more. So contrast paints by Games Workshop if you want to create that easy effect. Otherwise, you can just spray them over with an airbrush. I use maybe 4 different layers of green to create that effect, but you don't have to do it that way. You can just do the zenithal and then go over with the green. So yeah, I'm very, very happy with that one. Next up, we're taking a look at some of the miniatures in a worker placement game called Galaxy Hunters. All right, so these are some of the first miniatures I've ever painted. Whoop, let's get into focus there. Check that out, hey? And a lot of these guys have a lot of sort of features and different areas. You know, I've had to use a few different colors all over the model, right? And the next tip I'm gonna share with you is how to sort of paint while not crossing over into lines and stuff like that. And it's a very simple thing. A lot of people might intuitively already do it, right? But if you want to paint in an area and not cross over something, and I'll show you an example right here, like the numbers right here. There are some holes in there. There's space around here that would be really annoying if you painted like over it, if you crossed over. What you do with your brush is you take a little bit of paint on there, right? And rather than painting like this, because as you can see, that brush is going to go right in the hole, right? I'm going over it and it's going to go in the hole, and it's going to take away that sort of depth feeling of that number popping out. You really don't want to be painting in the hole. So how do you do this? You take the brush and you put it on its side. So you put the paint on the side like this and you just brush across like that. So it's just hitting the surface there. Okay, and that way you can avoid going over into the sides here, right? It's very hard to make that mistake and cross over. Like I'd have to be really not paying attention to what I'm doing. And it's much easier just to paint over like that. And like even if I go across that hole, unless the paint is really wet, it's not going in there. It's just gonna go straight across that number. So that's my next tip for you. Okay, the next game is Scythe, a game that's fallen out of favor with me recently. And it's a real shame because the miniatures in this game are awesome. So let's have a look at those. All right, now as you can see, I never got around to finishing painting all of these, but I did finish painting all the mechs for every faction. And I'm quite proud of the fact that I used a different environment for each one of these mechs. So that's what I'm going to showcase for you today. So let's start with this one, the Saxony faction. I did a very, very modest sort of design. I went with well, let's get a focus there. Okay. All right, with the Saxony, I went with a very modest sort of design. I just made them really sort of muddy, like they've just been trawling through the tunnels, which after all, that's what their faction does. They attack from tunnels and stuff like that. And to achieve something like this is really very easy. I want to show you how I did this. I just used this. This is a textured paint by Vallejo. And the idea is you just take your paintbrush, and of course you want to use a paintbrush that you don't like, because whatever brush you sink in here is going to get like really ruined, because there's like a sandy sort of textury paint, and you just lather that on to the bottom of the base there, and you want to make sure you don't get it on the miniature, right? Otherwise it's going to create that sort of bumpy texture on the miniature. So be careful just to go around and hit the bottom of the base there, and it creates a really nice effect. And I also want to show that you don't have to stick with that color as well, like that base color of that textured earth, which does look nice, but you can paint over on top of it. So I've done that here with this one. This is the Nordic mechs. We're gonna zoom, focus in on that one. It doesn't want to. There we go. So we're focusing on that one, and you can see I didn't use quite so much, but you can see that I've got a little bit of that texture in there, and that sort of created that sort of sandy kind of look that I was going for. I didn't want it to be too full on. I just used a little bit, and it kind of looks like he's just rocked up on the beach. And you can see also that on that base, these rocks, they don't come with the miniature. I've actually put them there myself. So to do that, what I've used is these here. You can grab these at hobby stores. They're just little sort of gritty rocks that you can super glue to the bases, and then you paint over them. So I paint over them with that gray color and give them a little bit of a dry brush. And if you don't know what a dry brush is, I'm going to show you what that is too. So a dry brush, you take a brush that you do not like, because doing this damages brushes. There's a few things here that are going to ruin your brushes, right? And you want to get some paper towel, okay? You get the color that you want, you put it on your brush, and you want to brush the majority of the paint off your brush. So you're gonna have a lot of paint on your paper here, and then when you start to see that your brush is no longer leaving paint on the paper, that's the perfect time to start dry brushing. So you start brushing the surface of your model, and it's gonna have the opposite effect that wet paint does. So wet paint is gonna seep deep into the crevices and in those gaps and stuff like that, whereas when you're brushing with the dry brush, only the higher up sections are going to get that paint. So if you look very closely, you'll see those rocks there. You can see all the parts that are sort of popping out. They're a lighter gray. So I've used a different type of gray to make it look more alive, to make it pop, right? I'll see if I can show you a different example. Oh, with the Saxony mechs, I also used dry brushing on the mechs. I don't know if you can actually see what do you call the, I want to call them buttons, but they're not that. Like all the sort of bits and bobs sticking out of the screws. That's the word I'm looking for, like screws in the mech. And I've dry brushed over that with a sort of metallic gray. And you can see that that's popped out. Like all those screws have really, screws or rivets or whatever you want to call them, they're all, well, we've lost them again. They're all standing out, and it just makes the model look so much more alive and interesting, yeah? All right, the next one we're going to show you is this one here, the Chimera mech. And two things I want to talk about here is this stuff here, that camouflage camo sort of look. What I've done there is I've actually gone over the entire model in one color, so that sort of beige, boring color that you can see underneath. And to create this sort of splotchy effect, what you want to do is you really want to water down your paint and you blotch it on there. And what that is going to do is it's just going to spill over into different areas, and you just let it do that, and it will just spill into different areas, and then you let it dry, and then you do it again with a different color and sort of different spots. And it's okay if those colors overlap. You kind of want them to do that, and they sort of will bleed into each other, and they'll create this sort of camo-y effect. So that's what we call wet blending. I'm not like an expert at it, but give it a practice and you can do some really cool stuff with it. It's also really cool for, you know, blending all sorts of different colors together. So it creates these really nice transitions. So yeah, I might showcase a few more wet blends later on if I have more of a go of it. But this is the only one I have at the moment. The base here, you'll notice, is all broken, right? So what I've done there is I don't have the container anymore because I've ran out of it, but this is like a crackle paste. So you put this on the base of your miniature and it will begin to crack, like when it dries. So you leave it overnight or 2 days or however long it takes to dry, and that will start to break and crack, and it creates that sort of deserty sort of feel, which is really cool. And if you want it to pop even more, you just take that wash that we talked about before, right? And you just push it in there, and it's going to go seeping into those crevices and make those cracks look even darker and stand out even more. The next one I want to show you here is the Polania mechs. And all I've done is just create sort of a grassy sort of effect here. And this is really nice. And again, you can do this with this kind of stuff. Very easy. You just take pinches of this, you apply some glue first to the model where you want it to stick, and you just pinch some grass there. A bunch of it's going to fall off, but most of it's going to stick on there. You're going to create that really nice grassy effect. The more glue you use, the more grass is going to stick on here. So this one kind of looks like, you know, there's sort of dead patches of grass around it. But whereas if you look at this one here, I've gone the opposite way, and this has created really sort of nice sort of shrubbery, almost like mossy kind of look, right? So he's going through like a, I don't know, like a very rich, dense rainforesty sort of area, and that fuzzy sort of moss is really cool. So to get that type of effect, I just had to use more glue, and I just dipped the whole thing in the environment that I wanted. And if you don't get the desired effect, you just put a little bit more glue and just keep doing it till you get like as much as you want there. And we've also got here, this one was heavily inspired. I don't know if you guys have seen Red Alert. I was a major fan of those games back in the day, and I was very much inspired by that game to go with like the golden sickles on this one. Yeah, I really like that one. And we've gone with a snowy base. Again, you just grab and this stuff, like, it is a little bit expensive, but it lasts forever. Like, I will not run out of this ever. Like, it just, and these rocks here, I've used so many of these, and like, I barely used a third of this. I'll never run out of this, you know what I mean? So this stuff lasts a very long time. And I've just put a lot of snow there. Again, you want to glue that down, and you can also apply that to the top of your miniature as well. So like, just applying a little bit of glue, and it looks like it's been snowed on, like we've like marched into a snowy battlefield, which is really nice. And you just want to make sure that you're putting the glue on the sort of topmost parts of a mech. It's a bit weird if you've got snow underneath it, right? So just the top parts, just so it gives that effect like it's just dropped down on top of it. Hey guys, the last couple of miniatures I want to show off today are some from Citadels Unfair. So this is the crown that you can obtain if you play the King card, and this is like a first player token in Citadels. What I want to show you here is sometimes you have these very sort of small details, particularly inside the crown. You can see there's some stitching on a button there. And some people will tell me, you know, they find it very, very hard to keep their hand steady to hit those kinds of things, and they feel like they're going to spill over into other areas. So this is another trick I want to give you to keep your painting arm steady. Is you want to be able to counterbalance or secure all your limbs while I'm holding it like this. You know, my arm just can freely wobble around, and my hand might start shaking, so it makes it really tricky. What you want to do is you want to lock in your shoulders and your elbows right into your ribs. So right now I've got my elbows right up against my ribs. So it looks funny. I kind of look like a chicken, but the elbows are in, and I feel a lot more sturdier already. And the next thing you want to do is keep your wrists together. So you can actually lean upon your wrist, and you can just ever so carefully be very delicate with that brush. And I have a lot more control now because I'm resting on my wrist. I have so much more control, and it's much easier. So give that a try. If you feel like you have trouble, you know, keeping a steady brush, give that technique a go. It really does help. And the next one I will show you is the roller coaster. So this is like the round tracker in Unfair. And personally, I'm not in love with my paint job here, but the lesson to learn from this one is that we all start somewhere, and you know, we don't always create works of art, but what this is better than gray plastic. So it's always better to chuck some paint on there, even if, you know, it's not your best fantastic job. Keep painting, because it does make the game look a whole lot better, and you know, people still appreciate it, even if it's not your finest work, you know what I mean? It's still nice to have on the table. So yeah, thanks guys. I really appreciate you watching the vid, and I'll catch you next time.